If you look at the amount of money that is being spent, the expectation of profits that companies have from AI based on what they're spending to buy NVIDIA chips, right? And if you take that number and then you subtract the amount of money that companies are getting, there's like a $500 billion gap. There are not enough people buying OpenAI subscriptions and using the Microsoft AI products. It's not even clear. Like Facebook is buying tons of NVIDIA chips, right? Tons. How are they monetizing that? Not really clear. So if companies aren't able to make any money off of their NVIDIA investments, then eventually they stop buying as many chips. Now, my hypothesis is that that is not going to happen, that we are going to find enormous benefits from this. But there's definitely a scenario where they're in trouble.
I'm Bob Safian, and I'm here with Nick Thompson, CEO of The Atlantic. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Bob, I'm delighted to join you.
The Atlantic covers so many things, but for the purposes of today's discussion, I want to focus in on big tech. The value of tech businesses has become extraordinary, like the $1 trillion club. I mean, I can't believe we're even using that figure, and at the same time, it's become almost commonplace. Is the consolidation in big tech a good thing, a bad thing, a bubble?
It's definitely not a good thing, right? It would be better for the world if there's more competition, but the way the tech industry works, there are network effects. And so there's inevitable consolidation. And then there are all kinds of societal forces that, once you have a big successful company, it's easier to get regulations written in your way. It's easier to buy competitors. Like it is easier to grow than it is for a startup to grow. So it is sort of a natural effect of the way capitalism works that you're going to end up with some giant companies. Is it a bubble? It's interesting. If you look at the $1 trillion club, Apple is definitely going to be there, right? In 3 years, right? There's no scenario, I think, where Apple's market cap collapses. NVIDIA, on the other hand, could be worth much less, right? AI could turn out to be far less valuable than we think. And it could, be removed from the club. Same thing could happen with Tesla. It could be outcompeted in multiple ways, right? So of the companies that are either in the $1 trillion club or have reached that valuation, there's some I would say that the expected value over a 5-year period is roughly the same. It's just with Apple, you have a higher floor, lower ceiling. With NVIDIA, you have a lower floor, higher ceiling.
I mean, NVIDIA, it's kind of gone from an almost anonymous company to an it company because of its stock price soaring.
Yeah.
Some people say it's the most important company in the world right now based on what it is. Where are you on NVIDIA?
I mean, it might be the most important company in the world. No, I mean, it is certainly one of the most interesting companies in the world because you're completely right. Like the last few years, they made a number of bets that were brilliant, right? They bet on GPUs. They understood where AI was going. And then they developed all of this market power by being the one supplier of AI chips, which they've been able to use in all kinds of canny ways to shape the industry, shape their financial fortunes. They're masterful. Now, what will be interesting is, if markets don't develop the way NVIDIA's investors expect and the way AI enthusiasts expect, then things can get rocky, but they're pretty smart over there.
There are also been beneficiaries in some ways of the rest of the chip business sort of missing this turn, right? I mean, Intel seemingly, Pat Gelsinger pushed out as CEO. It's almost like the biggest threat to NVIDIA is not from others in their own business, but from China blocking them from getting the parts they need or something.
I think the biggest blocker is just there are not effective business applications with AI, right? If you look at the amount of money that is being spent, the expectation of profits that companies have from AI based on what they're spending to buy NVIDIA chips, right? And if you take that number and then you subtract the amount of money that companies are getting, there's like a $500 billion gap, right? So they're spending as though total revenue is $600 billion and they're bringing in $100 billion, right? There are not enough people buying OpenAI subscriptions and using the Microsoft AI products. It's not even clear. Like Facebook is buying tons of NVIDIA chips, right? Tons. How are they monetizing that? Not really clear, right? Like they've built a chat product into WhatsApp. They've built it into Instagram. There's some value there. They've built Llama, which is wonderful, but they don't monetize really Llama. So if companies aren't able to make any money off of their NVIDIA investments, then eventually they stop buying as many chips. Now, my hypothesis is that that is not going to happen, that we are going to find enormous benefits from this, that Facebook will figure out how to monetize it, because Facebook always figures out how to monetize things. And NVIDIA will be fine, but there's definitely a scenario where they're in trouble.
You mentioned OpenAI. They recently released the AI video model, Sora. Yeah. They seem to continually kind of lead development, even though others, Google and whatnot, spending a ton investing in their own models. Is OpenAI still special?
OpenAI made this amazing bet, 5 years ago, right? 6 years ago, when they saw the promise of transformers and they understood scaling laws. They just, put more and more money into compute, into data, and they bet in a way that nobody else did. And that gave them a large lead, right? And the question is, can that lead be sustained, even though most of the original employees who are most important to it have left, many of whom are off building competitive companies, right? Yeah. Dario Amodei has built Anthropic, which is a competitive company. Ilya Sutskever is building a company that maybe will competitive, or Marathi. And there's still Sam Altman, there's still some engineers, but it is a huge question of whether they can continue to have their special sauce. They do have a big advantage, having been first to market, right? Like people talk about ChatGPT the way they talk about Band-Aids, right? It has this incredible brand. It has massive user adoption. They do have like huge press benefits. Will they still have a technical lead in 2 years over Google? I don't know. Every 6 months, the gap between OpenAI and the rest of the AI field narrows.
And Sam Altman, who you mentioned, I mean, this turnover in the OpenAI leadership team and this sort of incredible like governance drama a year ago where he was pushed out and then got his way back. Like, what's the rap on Altman these days? Because in some places he's almost like statesman-like in the way he acts, but there's also this kind of wariness, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly utterly brilliant, right? But there's not. He doesn't have the reverence and respect that Steve Jobs had. There isn't the same level of trust on his decision making. He doesn't have the same loyalty. Right? If you look at the people who worked with Jobs, like they would have died for him, right? And if you look at the people who work with Altman, right, one of them tried to fire him. He's a very complicated guy with a very complicated reputation.
And the question about what OpenAI's status is going to be, like this move between not-for-profit or for-profit or whatever the quasi status that the company has, that just sort of complicates it because no one really quite knows what his motivation is in all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that conflict ends with them just becoming, gradually over time, you have to change board governance. They're just going to become fully profitable and like every other company. And the idealism which was founded, I think, a lot of it has dissipated. We're building AI for humanity. We're going to give it away for free. That they really just run like every other company we know, many of which have good value statements, and the employees are, very good-hearted people who are fully intent on helping the rest of the world. But I think the period in which OpenAI was different from the rest of the companies in Silicon Valley is closing.
And the whole idea of idealism in Silicon Valley, is that less real or less important than it used to be with all these companies at these enormous valuations?
Silicon Valley has always been a mix of idealism, true idealism, right? Like if you look at the founding DNA of Silicon Valley, there are true idealists who come out of the counterculture, right? Who come out of the Berkeley free speech movement, who, come from sort of the Stewart Brand, whole earth catalog, open source. There's real desire to have, an independent internet that, is different from all the other structures of the world, right? So that strand exists. And in fact, you can still see that strand. And to a certain degree, it exists. Like, it's interesting. The Web3 world, to me, has some of the purest idealists and some of the most grotesque grifters. Right? And so you can see the strand of idealism, and that idealism exists at all of these big companies, right? It certainly exists to some degree in early Facebook, right? Where it's, it's about connecting people, right? Because of a genuine belief that connecting people makes the world better. Now, it so happens that connecting people also makes you billionaires, which turns out to be very beneficial as well. Like Google starts with a certain amount of idealism. Over time, as idealistic employees kind of leave, as money becomes more important, as people start to compete about their size, their yachts, the idealism dissipates. And I think you're seeing that in AI. The folks who went into AI very early on saw, in a way that much of society didn't see, how powerful this would be, really cared about making sure they did it right. And then over time, some of them just got excited by the money. And then also all these other people came in because of business opportunities, money, stock grants. The most interesting company to me on this question, the one to really watch, is Anthropic, because it was 100% founded because, of a group within OpenAI who didn't believe that Sam Altman and the other leaders of OpenAI were taking safety seriously enough, and that some of the idealism had dissipated. And so Anthropic was set up in a very different way. And it has continued to hold to those principles in a way that has been impressive. And so I am extremely interested in whether Anthropic goes through a big shift.
Another complex persona you alluded to, Mark Zuckerberg, shortlisted for Time's Person of the Year last week. You ran a Wired cover story in 2018 with a sort of beaten and bruised Zuckerberg on the cover. I'm curious how you see Zuckerberg today, how you sort of explain why Time would consider him a Person of the Year candidate.
He's a remarkable figure. He keeps making the right long-term decisions. And his ability to do that over and over is astonishing. And he does make lots of bad decisions. And what we were critical of, if you look at those stories that I co-wrote with Fred Vogelstein at Wired, 2 very long investigative pieces and a number of other pieces. It was a factual analysis of just what went wrong. But there was never a sense that, when you would talk to people, even people who were very critical of Mark Zuckerberg, even people who felt that he was, motivated by the wrong things, everybody saw that he kind of figured things out, right? That he was able to understand where the mobile web was going before everybody else. That he was able to understand the way that social architecture works. Probably will end up having made a big mistake on VR, but we don't know for sure. And then with AI, it's astonishing that Facebook somehow has been able to build the primary open source platform, which kind of defies all logic, all that you would think. And my guess is that they're able to figure out a really smart way to make that a core part of their company. So it's amazing because I don't know how old he is, but maybe early 40s. He's gone through a whole number of reinventions, and he does some stupid billionaire stuff, like the cage fight threat with Elon. There's some stuff where you're just you don't need to do that. You don't need to play those games. But I'm impressed that he's still there and still working and still making the big decisions. He hasn't stepped away and said, he hasn't gone through some kind of midlife crisis and given up on the company and decided he's just going to disappear on his boat.
You never know where these characters are going to go. In the same way that Elon Musk has become a character who, is going places that maybe you and I wouldn't have predicted.
I definitely wouldn't have predicted, where Elon Musk has gone. He's built 2 companies that are incredibly important to humankind's future. He's seen things out in the distance that nobody else has seen. And then he's, become a professional shit poster in certain ways that just seems utterly beneath him and utterly toxic for this country. To me, the most remarkable thing about Musk is his ability to turn losses into victories. I mean, if you look at Twitter, it seemed like he had spent $40 billion and wasted it, right? And he's certainly, the value of Twitter is massively less than when he bought it. But his ability to use it to help get Trump elected, which has then massively helped all of his other businesses. Elon has made hundreds of billions of dollars off of his Twitter acquisition. His ability to
but not
turn
through
the
Twitter.
Not through Twitter, right? He's lost a lot of money through Twitter. So anybody who gave him money for Twitter regrets that. However, he's been able to turn the platform into a sort of a tool for self-promotion and tool for mobilization, and hugely rebounded to his benefit. So his ability to turn a losing hand into a winning hand, gotta admire that.
Apple had an interesting year. It made a big bet on the Apple Vision Pro, which didn't really pay off. Apple Intelligence is kind of a clever playoff of AI, but not yet a breakthrough experience. Do you see more trouble or more opportunity ahead for Apple? Because it feels like a particularly tricky moment.
It's a tricky moment, but I mean, like people have been saying Apple has lost its steam since 6 months after Tim Cook took over. So Vision Pro, okay, maybe it didn't hit the mark, but they have so many products. They have an ecosystem that people are so locked into. I think on-device AI is actually going to really matter. And I think that we are going to want on-device AI that really works, in part for energy costs. Like, you're not going to want to be constantly making calls to servers, privacy concerns. I think Apple will figure out on-device AI, whether it's 2 years from now, but AI will end up being extremely valuable to Apple.
And even though, most phones in the world are not iPhones, less than 60% market share in the US, but not dollar share, right?
It's like 100% of the profit share is Apple in the phone market, right? So they, all the money made on phones basically goes to Apple.
You recently called the potential ban on TikTok a slippery slope for First Amendment rights.
So I have kind of like non-conventional views on it, in which I don't like the existence of TikTok, partly because as the father of 3 children, you can see how toxic it is on young people. I see the dangers, and I have lots of friends in national security who are all very convinced that TikTok can and will be weaponized by China in a potential moment of conflict, right? If there is a conflict over Taiwan, the smartest people I know who know the most about national security absolutely are convinced that TikTok will be weaponized to change American public opinion. And in fact, there are, real privacy risks. All of that said, I don't like the idea of banning it. It just does not seem like something a country that values the First Amendment should do. I understand that there's a complicated question of whether technically the existence of a platform counts as free speech, right? Is it the individual? Is it the platform? There is an interesting legal argument over whether the First Amendment applies. I am just saying, as someone who loves speech, who loves more of it, the notion that we would go and shut down an entire platform where people exercise their free speech is quite unsettling. It seems like banning a social media platform because you are worried that it will be used to give young people a version of the world that the government disagrees with. That seems like the kind of thing you do in Turkmenistan, right? It doesn't seem like the kind of thing you do in the United States. In the United States, you try to do counter programming. You try to have speech of another sort. Maybe you have people go onto TikTok and try to present an alternative view. Maybe you talk more about the biases in the algorithm. I don't think you shut the whole thing down. I think the United States will be in a better position with no TikTok. I do not like the logic for it.
I want to ask you about your business at The Atlantic. You're operating and running this business in the midst of growing distrust of the media. And I'm curious what it's like for you to run The Atlantic in this climate and how you navigate and think about that.
Well, that's a very hard thing. And it is one of the most unfortunate facts about media today. It does hang over everything. So why is there all this distrust, right? There's all this distrust because, in part, there's been a huge campaign by extremely rich people, including Elon Musk, Donald Trump, to discredit the media because they didn't like coverage of themselves. It has happened because of disintermediation of the media. It has happened because of mistakes that media has made. There's all kinds of reasons, but it has certainly happened. What we have to do is make sure that we are as trusted as possible, right? Work as hard as we can to make sure every fact is as accurate as possible, that every story in a big sense is as fair as possible, that we're reaching as many people as possible. And it's an editorial matter. And then on the business side, we have to go out and try to find the largest group of readers we can and try to get them into direct relationships with us as opposed to relationships through intermediaries, particularly tech platforms or walled gardens.
One of the things that I always struggled with as a editorial person, which I know is sort of where your soul is, you want to get your stories out, your content out to as many people as possible. But sometimes the best business model is like high price to a fewer, smaller, more targeted group of people. How do you think about balancing those motivations and those business realities?
I have a view which is probably not the one that maximizes economic return, but it happens to work, which is editorial chooses what they're going to write about and how they're going to write about it. And they do that without input. And then once that's done, then we choose on the business side how best to make a business model around it. And sometimes it does involve trade-offs. And so my view is like edit should write whatever stories they want to write, right? However they want to do it. Then we should go out and fight for every possible reader in every possible way, right? You should SEO optimize, figure out the exact right time to post it on Facebook. You should do all the things like figure out the subreddit and hope that somebody posts it there. Fight for every reader. Don't just sit back. And I think that is one difference between the way I view it and the way some other people, particularly in elite media institutions, where they view that as not something that you should spend time and effort on. But I believe in like fighting for every reader in every possible way. Also, though, I believe in finding a business model that is most likely to make the place financially sustainable and able to exist in the long run. Probably the key thing that we've done at The Atlantic, and also something we did when I worked at The New Yorker and when I worked at Wired, was build a paywall. And there are trade-offs in paywall, because once you have a paywall, fewer people can read your stuff. And you accept that trade-off because you have to make the place sustainable, and you can't support the kind of journalism The Atlantic does without a subscriber model. It's an either or. You can either support this and make it sustaining in the long run with a paywall, or you cannot. And so we've chosen to do that.
I know The Atlantic has a partnership with OpenAI. Is that something that's going to meaningfully benefit the business?
No, I mean, they do pay us, but like we have advertisers who will pay us more than OpenAI pays us this year. I mean, it's a useful revenue stream. The most useful thing that will come out of it is if through our partnership, OpenAI builds a search product that drives readers and does all, like over time, Google built a search product that helps support all of our media businesses. That's going to be very hard to replicate as we move from search engines to answer engines. My default assumption is that 3 years from now, we're navigating the web through answer engines and we're not clicking out to external sites. And if OpenAI ultimately is able to build an answer engine that also drives readership directly to products created by media organizations, that is a much better future for media. So by far the most important thing will not be the check that they will write for us, to us for licensing and RAG, but will be, in the long run, I hope, an answer engine that really drives readership. And that's good for everybody, right? And that is the outcome that is best for OpenAI, because if search engines disappear and answer engines undercut the whole business of media and media organizations go away, well, then there's far less high quality information to feed into the answer engines.
Right.
So, Google benefited because it drove a lot of readers. We were able to drive businesses around those readers. And then there was more high quality information, which Google could index. The hope with AI is that the same thing will happen. That is entirely unclear, though. And my worry is that we're not heading in the right direction. So I am doing what I can to try to push us there, but I don't know whether that will succeed.
Because otherwise, the economics of being a creator of this content sort of dissipates.
Yeah. By far the best outcome, in my view, would be answer engines, properly credit the content that helps create the answers, right? So I have been, The Atlantic is partnered with a company called ProRata that is working on this, and they're trying to show in any given answer, okay, this answer is 6% due to a Fast Company story and 5% from a Wall Street Journal story, and then can attribute revenue back to the publications based on that. And then also has external links so that people can go and read the original source material, and then also takes into account journalistic values. It doesn't quote excessively. It doesn't mimic style, right? There are a whole lot of things that really matter to writers and journalists. That would be the ideal answer engine. So it is paying people whose sources contributed to the answer. It is driving people to it, and it is respecting journalistic rules. Whether we'll get there, who knows? The economics are not entirely aligned, but that's the goal.
So how do you think about or measure success for your media company today?
Success for us will be increasing our reach, increasing our influence, publishing as much good journalism into the world and being financially sustainable. Our owner is Lorraine Powell Jobs. I should probably disclose that while talking about Apple. Was married to Steve Jobs. So she is well off. And whether the Atlantic makes money or not is not her principal source of income. However, she is a businesswoman, and she has mandated that we operate this place at a profit. Like, she doesn't want to fund it indefinitely. There was a period of losses that she covered. And so we worked extremely hard the last few years to get this place to profitability, and we fully intend to stay there. And every decision we make will be directed towards doing the best and most important journalism that has the best effect on the world that we can do, that is done in a way that is sustainable. We don't want to ever go back to losses.
This time of year, a lot of people aim to set new goals to get themselves on track. And I'm curious if you have any advice for those who are looking to create new habits for the new year.
I have like a thing I do each year where I have sort of habits I want to change or shift. And then I keep track of how many days in a row I've done that. And I have like a Excel spreadsheet that sort of tracks it for the whole year. And I have a pretty intense to-do list, which I think has been very helpful to me. On the left is what I'm going to do right now. And I try to only do like 3 things. So I will do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do this. And then the second category is stuff I'm going to do today. Like, so this stuff has to get done today. And the third category is stuff I've got to get done. Doesn't have to be today, but ideally you're getting rid of doing some of it. And then the next category is like, the list of stuff for the year that I'm trying to pay attention to. It helps me keep track of what's going on in the day, so you don't end up losing a bunch of time because you look over and you're like, oh wait, I got to get all that done today, right? So it's a useful mechanism.
Yeah. You got to find the system that works right for you. Are there things at stake as we look ahead to 2025 that are most on your mind?
I do not think that the Atlantic, or really any other media company, is positioned in a way that will make it fully resilient if AI continues on the trajectory that it is on right now. If the improvement curve is the same as it's been the last 2 years, there will be a complete reshaping of the internet, and there will be a complete reshaping of the way knowledge, information, reporting, and storytelling work. And so preparing the Atlantic to be in a completely resilient spot for that is very hard. And it's a combination of figuring out like how answer engines will work, figuring out how the Atlantic will exist in a web that has been turned upside down by AI, figuring out how AI can be used to help make the business side operate more efficiently, which we're doing, figuring out also how to prevent AI from being used on the editorial side in a way that would reduce trust, because there's no doubt that there are going to be a bunch of publications that use AI to report and tell stories in a way that blows trust, right? And so you can't do that. We say with The Atlantic is a magazine, for humans, by humans. Everything is written by humans. While also, I genuinely believe that AI will be a useful tool for interrogating ideas, figuring out how to go through data sets. So the balance of how AI is used in the newsroom, extremely delicate and extremely important. Then the way we build our business model to make it maximally resilient in a world in which there's extremely powerful AI, my New Year's resolution is to try to get that more right.
Well, Nick, as always, it's great to talk with you, and
so much
thanks
fun
for doing this.
No, it's amazing. I love chatting with you, Bob. It's always wonderful to see you, always wonderful to chat with you, and it's an honor to be on the podcast. Thank you.